All right, so thank you for signing up and downloading this on-demand webinar on how to customize the end user's integration experience with Alloy. It's a question that we get a good amount, both from customers and prospects. And so we're really looking to shed some light on that subject and hopefully provide you all with some more clarity here walking away from it. So before getting into the main content for the day, we wanted to start at the end, right? And the reason for that is that one of the most common questions that we get, as I mentioned, is, okay, so we're using an embedded IPaaS, right? But what does that mean in terms of the end user experience? What does my team see who's actually designing the integrations versus what do my end users see who are the ones who are actually using the integrations to run their businesses, right? And so in order to answer that question, we figured we would just show you. So at the top left here, what you can see is an example of an integrations page for an Alloy customer named Aspire. They're an influencer marketing platform that's commerce focused. And this is what their users are going to interact with to launch the integrations that they're building with Alloy, right? Gorgeous, Klaviyo. And then on the back end, as you see in the bottom right, that's Alloy's interface that their product team is actually interfacing with to build those integrations, right? And so when you think about data mapping, setting your trigger, defining where you want data to go, whether it's a separate app or your own webhook or a database, those things are all happening within this interface, right? And so once you design integrations here, they become made available to customers in this fashion. So to get into the agenda for the day, we've already covered what you see versus what your users see. And before getting into more detail, what we'd really like to do is orient around embedded and how it works, both on the user end and the ISVN, and as well as some key terms, right, that it'd be helpful to know before we dig in further. We're going to talk about broadly what you can customize in Alloy and crucially why, right, what the philosophy behind that is. We're going to talk about how to design your integrations marketplace and make integrations available to find and launch to your users. We're going to talk about how to tailor the authentication experience as well, right? So in different scenarios, how you want to handle authentication for your users, depending on what the business scenario is dictating. And then we'll just remind you quickly at the end why build on Alloy, right? Obviously, we're not the only embedded IPaaS out there. And so we'd want to go through and explain some of the key differentiators that our customers see versus using some of the other tools that are out there. All right. So as promised, right, let's provide a quick overview on how embedded works. And we really think about this, right, in kind of three sort of separate steps. If you look at our quick start guide and our documentation, it's set up this way for that reason. And so the first step as a software vendor is you have to actually define and build your integration, right? Select which apps you want to pull data from, map that data to your preferred destination, make sure that the data itself is entering into the fields in that destination that you want, and configure that integration, right? Whether it's a one-way sync just to send data for analytics or a bi-directional sync that's designed for other use cases, right? That's the first step in this process. From there, you use Alloy to set up the code, right? And essentially what that means is you're going to have the ability to use our APIs to abstract the complexities of authentication, to render an authentication experience for your users. And we'll get into more detail as to the different ways that you can do that. And then actually launch your integration and have it go live, right? And then once you go live, we'll talk about the steps that you can take to customize the end user experience beyond that in terms of how you can share your integrations and make them available to folks we've talked about. And so just a few key terms to refresh ourselves on before jumping into this. So when we refer to a workflow, what we're referring to is the building blocks of an integration, right? And so if one integration will typically contain multiple workflows, a good example of this is in any bidirectional sync, right? Let's say you're pulling data from a user's commerce platform back to your app. That would be one workflow. And then the second workflow that would comprise the integration is actually sending data from your app back over to the end user's platform, commerce platform, right? The embedded modal is the interface by which Alloy embedded customers make authentication experiences available to their users, right? And to give them the ability to securely sign in and authenticate credentials for their different apps. And then the integrations marketplace itself, right, which is what your users are going to navigate in order to find and launch the integrations that you're ultimately developing for them. Okay. So last thing before I turn it over to our CTO, Greg, talking about what you can customize in Alloy and why. And there's kind of two different aspects to this, right? The first one being designing your marketplace, which, as I just mentioned, is what your customers are going to interface with in order to find and launch their integrations. And we've seen a couple of examples of that already. And taken together, the idea is that by making it simple to find and launch integrations and then securely authenticate credentials, you're able to deliver the right experience every time, regardless of what the integration scenario is, right? And we'll dig into some context around those scenarios in more detail as we present the different features that Alloy offers in order to help you customize the experience in these different layers. Okay, with that, I will turn it over to our CTO, Greg.
Thanks, Anurag. Hey, everybody. So as Anurag kind of described here, embedded really helps you power the integration layer of your commerce platform. So we've got over 220 integrations and counting, and we're always adding more. So that's an ever-evolving number. What you're looking at here is probably the most common use case that we see embedded used for. And this is basically powering an integrations page. So we've all been there. You've probably been to maybe, an apps page or an app store page or an integrations page. You see this kind of tile format or anything of the sort where you can choose from the integrations you like to select. And so embedded can be used to power this. And so the neat part about embedded is that we fit totally natively within your existing product's user interface, right? So this is rendered via just an API call. You can customize this, control however you'd like this to look. It's totally up to you. And we allow you to sit right next to any existing integration that you built in-house. So for instance, maybe you have 2 or 3 integrations that you're committed to building in-house and you want to continue supporting those. Maybe you also want to add more. You can do that, no problem at all, using embedded. Our technology will sit right next to that in real time and looks totally native. The user will never know that Alloy Embedded is powering it behind the scenes. So yeah, super, super easy to do so. On the right-hand side here, we have 2 examples of customers that are using Alloy Embedded. In the back, you'll see Gorgeous. It's a fantastic customer. They've got a whole bunch of integrations live here. You also see a shipping company right down there in the front, which has a few integrations also live. And so each of these customers, we are expanding and growing our integration lists with. So moving on. So let's talk a little bit about actual customization, because customization is really the bread and butter of what typically comes up and how much control do I have when I'm using an embedded IPaaS tool. If you're an engineer, if you're a product manager, you're probably asking, hey, look, I think this is a great tool. It's going to make my life easier, streamline my roadmap, make things faster for me. But you're probably saying, gosh, I don't want to give up customization and control as a result. And we don't want you to either. I'm an engineer. My co-founder's an engineer. Our team is very engineering centric. And so we built this company focusing heavily on the engineering mindset, right? Saying, how can we make this a tool that engineers will feel comfortable with and will want to use? And that's what Alloy Embedded serves to do. So what you'll see here is that our modal is basically similar to like plaid.com. If you ever use plaid.com or any of those sort of tools where they ask you to connect, for example, to a third-party service, our modal will pop up. It's very similar to that. And so in this example, on the right-hand side, we have Shopify, as you can see here. So we're saying, connect to Shopify and enable that Shopify integration. The modal is super, super customizable, right? So the modal is the only element of Alloy Embedded that actually will show in your interface. We allow you to customize the colors. You can customize the colors to your brand's own design and theme. You can have a description, a title page, a completion page, and completely control the text. So very, very easy to control and overall to present. And this is, the basic, most simple implementation of Alloy Embedded. It takes a few minutes to get going here. You can easily control the look and feel. Awesome. So now let's take a look at an actual demo of how this works. So you'll see here, we're logged into Alloy Embedded, and we'll navigate over to the settings page. In the settings page, under General, you'll see brand color. And so from here, we can select a brand color. We can pop in this little info picker here, and we can use the slider to identify a color. Alternatively, we can also choose a hex code. And so you can see we can pop that in here. Now we'll press save. Once we press save, we'll navigate back to our integrations page. And we'll find the integration. We have one here. And we'll choose this preview button. Now, the preview button allows you to simulate what the modal will look like in Alloy Embedded. So you can see here that we've got this popped up here. And you'll see right here that the button is customized and colored exactly as we specified in the settings. Great. Good stuff. So moving on. So we also have our Secrets Manager. Now, our Secrets Manager is one of the most highly requested features that we heard from customers. When we initially launched Alloy, we initially launched with just a basic OAuth implementation. And the idea was that Alloy would abstract OAuth authentication for you, so you never need to worry about it. The problem that's presented is that your users will see Alloy is requesting access to whatever integration you're connecting to. And this is a little bit confusing sometimes. It's generally not a problem, but some folks will say, gosh, I want to have complete control over every piece of the brand and the look and feel of the implementation. If this is you, our Secrets Manager is the feature for you. So the Secrets Manager allows you to go in and supply your own client ID and client secret, and then we'll use that to make requests on your behalf. So what you can see here on the right-hand side are two images. On the left, you see here, you'll see this is what Alloy looks like without the Secrets Manager. And so it'll say Alloy is requesting access, in this example, to Shopify, and you'll approve it, you're good to go. If you want to take it a step further and use the Secrets Manager, you'll see that your app will be presented instead. So you can imagine your logo, your name, all that sort of stuff being presented there. Super, super customizable. This allows you to better own partnerships and have a really completely native experience. So the user never knows that Alloy Embedded is powering it behind the scenes. Now let's go a little bit further, right? So on the very extreme side of things, let's assume you want to control absolutely everything. So we've talked a little bit more about how the modal works previously. And the modal is what powers the implementations, right? So the modal is what will be presented to the users saying, hey, connect, for example, to Shopify. And that's how we will, trigger off the OAuth flow and go from there. Now, that being said, if you're saying, gosh, I want to control the entire experience possible, I don't even want to show the modal, we've got you. And so that's what the modal-free embedded feature allows you to do. So it's basically a simple API call. You'll pass over the information. You can either programmatically add a credential if you have it, or you can prompt an OAuth flow. And using the Secrets Manager, do that completely natively. So you'll do this in your backend. You'll prompt that OAuth flow. It'll use Secrets Manager. It'll show your brand and redirect you right back to your integrations page. Again, the user has never seen anything Alloy branded and never know that Alloy is powering it behind the scenes. So it creates a totally native and white labeled experience. Awesome. And lastly, we also have a feature called Embedded Link. Now, Embedded Link, it allows you to basically create more bespoke integrations that you can send off to individuals on a one-off basis. So perhaps there's an integration you want to build, maybe a shipping integration or something of the sort that kind of falls outside the line of what you normally would support on your integrations page. Maybe it's a one-off thing that needs to be done for a user. If that's the case, you can use Embedded Link. And so what will happen is you'll generate a link. This is similar to sharing Google Doc. You will invite the individual who you want to send it to the actual embedded link. And from there, they'll just authenticate, connect to their account, and they're off to the races. It's really easy and very minimal coding-wise. So let's take a look at it now. Cool. So back over here to Shopify. So let's say we want to use embedded link for Shopify. You'll see here the share button. You can choose it here, and we'll now select a user. So we can create a user now. Let's say Anurag. We'll create our first user. We'll put his email in. We'll select the time and the expiration time, which right here can be customized. You can say 1 week or 1 month or a year or whatever. The expiration time will basically tell you how long the link will be valid for. And then you'll create that shareable link. You copy that link, and I'll pop that over into a new window. And you can email this or send this out to your user, and they'll see something like this. This will, of course, use all the things we've talked about before, so it'll have the customized colors and all that sort of stuff. And this will allow the user to do a one-off connection. So they'll connect their Shopify account, and that's it. They're off to the races. So as you can see, in a mere matter of seconds, we're able to create an integration that a user can authenticate and begin building instantly. Cool.
Right.
Back to you, Anurag.
Thank you, Greg. Great stuff there. So to recap today, and just give a quick overview on what we've covered, right? So there are a couple of different ways that you can really customize the end user experience within Alloy, if you think about it in categories, right? The first one being how users actually browse and launch their desired integrations, and then how they actually authenticate, right, with the appropriate credentials and securely log in and take advantage of the work that your team has done. So in scenarios where you're looking to prioritize speed, you want some customization, but ultimately want to just rely on Alloy's modal to abstract the complexities of authentication, and you're not super worried about any Alloy branding appearing. Well, then you can simply use the built-in settings within Alloy Embedded to customize the colors that you're, or rather colors to match your brand guidelines, as well as a description of the integration and associated workflows so that your users know exactly what they're working with. In scenarios where you want to leverage that and you're connecting to, excuse me, and you're connecting to an OAuth enabled app. You know what? Why don't I just redo this slide? Sorry. All right, thank you, Greg. So to recap today, there are two major ways and areas wherein you can customize the end user experience for Alloy, right? The first one is the experience for users of actually browsing and finding their desired integrations. And as Greg mentioned, you can do that by standing up a new integrations marketplace based on Alloy and using our APIs. Or you can list new integrations that you're building in Alloy alongside the native ones that your team has already built if you have a more mature ecosystem already. So really designed to meet you where you are there. And then how they actually launch and authenticate, right? So the experience of actually launching the integration, making sure that that's consistent with your native in-product experience, and then making sure that users can securely authenticate and log in to the different apps that they're looking to use. Then, for the kind of piece of focusing on speed, right? When you really want to prioritize speed, the business scenario calls for launching an integration, but not necessarily being concerned about whether users can see that Alloy is helping to power it. Well, you can simply use the embedded modal and customize it using your own brand guidelines, so customizing the colors as well as the descriptions of the integrations and associated workflows so that it feels like a native experience and so that users know exactly what the integrations they're using do, right? In situations where you're connecting to OAuth enabled apps and you want to take that a step further, you can use Alloy Secrets Manager to completely obfuscate the fact that Alloy is involved at all simply by providing your own client ID and client secret, right? And then it'll say that your app is requesting access to whatever app your merchant is connecting to as opposed to Alloy. In scenarios where you have the engineering bandwidth to do so, and you really, really want to prioritize customization and fully designing the authentication experience yourself, well, you can bypass the embedded modal entirely, right? And the benefit of still using Alloy here is that by using our APIs, you still abstract away all the complexity of different types of authentication. And so ultimately, the onus is still on us to handle that and removes the burden from your engineering team. But it gives you the ability to fully customize the actual interface and UX, right? As opposed to relying on the modal or, a modal with secrets manager layer to top it. And then in situations where you want to share secure or one-off integrations, maybe it's from an urgent prospect ask or from a large customer, and you want to make it available to them, but you don't necessarily want to list it alongside the rest of your integrations. Well, then you can share integrations securely using embedded link. And as Greg mentioned, same way you would share a Google Doc or really any cloud file, right? Simply define which users have access to it, share that secure link via email or secure Slack channel, whatever the case may be, and your users can then access your integrations that way, and you don't have to list them alongside the rest of your marketplace. Then just a quick reminder, right? All of these benefits of embedded IPaaS are great, but why would your team build with Alloy as opposed to any of the other options that are out there, right? And there are a few things that we would point to here. Obviously, there's a lot more that we would say, but at a high level, we want to emphasize the fact that the infrastructure scales with you, right? And so whether you're, a fast growing startup like Gorgeous, like Greg mentioned, or one of the larger ISVs in the world, you really can rely on Alloy's infrastructure to scale with data volumes and always meet user demands, right? Whether that's a function of seasonality, fast growth, you never have to worry about that with Alloy. Another thing you never have to worry about, as I mentioned, is authentication mechanisms, right? Alloy handles varying types of authentication for you. So that way your team can just focus on designing integrations and the data flow and leave the rest to us. And then in the spirit of leaving the rest to us, right, API updates come along with that. Anytime anyone who's built an integration on this call, right, they understand that when you build integrations, it's not a static thing, right? APIs are always going to be updated. Apps are going to change those things in order to provide further functionality for their users. And so let us handle those for you. And so that way the integrations that your users are relying on are never disrupted, but the onus is not on your team to constantly monitor API changes. You can also simplify version management for your users along those lines. So when you do release new versions of your integrations, that will automatically prompt them, we meaning Alloy, to upgrade without disrupting their existing experience. Another thing that we would really proud of and like to hit on is our robust polling infrastructure, right? So when apps don't inherently support webhooks or don't natively support webhooks that you're connecting to, our polling infrastructure allows you to still set up data flow such that you're always getting close to real-time data, right? Even if it's not quite real-time exactly because of the lack of webhook infrastructure, you never have to worry about having a disconnect there. And then lastly, right, if and when things do go wrong, detailed logs to help you troubleshoot issues that are sent to your product or your desired destination in real time, right? And so our goal is to always help you anytime an issue arises, identify and troubleshoot it as quickly as possible before your users are impacted by the fallout of that. So for next steps, if you're new to Alloy, simply use the QR code on the screen here to book a chat with our team, whether that's wanting to chat through a use case or a specific challenge that you're facing integrating with a certain app. We'd love to kind of talk through things, share some of our expertise in the commerce space specifically, and see how we can help. If you're a current Alloy customer and you're curious about how to access some of these features, like you're using Alloy, but maybe you don't have Secrets Manager yet, or you haven't leveraged Modal Free Embedded, well, then reach out to your CS rep directly, and we would be happy to help and answer whatever questions we can.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.